Repairs at Ardmore High School will go through the bid process. City Hall is reeling from the worst ransomware attack in its history. And weekly political demonstrations downtown hit the 1-year mark. These stories and more on This Week in Ardmore from Ardmore Leader. I'm News Director Michael Dean Smith. Thank you for downloading episode 62 of This Week in Ardmore, a weekly podcast from Ardmore Leader dedicated to independent coverage of local news. Here are the things I've been following around Ardmore, Oklahoma for the week of May 1st. Damage to parts of the Ardmore High School campus will be fixed after a weeks-long bid process. School officials asked the school board on Monday to declare an emergency and bypass the competitive bid process, but the board's newest member rejected that declaration. Board member Jimmy John has declined to comment on exactly why he did not want to declare an emergency and fast-track those repairs before the next school year starts in August. Geothermal units on the high school roof were damaged over spring break back in March and caused thousands of gallons of hazardous water to pour into several classrooms and storage areas. Students and teachers spent over 5 weeks in virtual learning due to that damage before they returned to class on Wednesday. Parts of Ardmore City Hall's computer network were compromised in early April. A statement from City Hall this week said that the ransomware attack back on April 8th was limited to files from the Ardmore Police Department. The city's top IT officer told me this week that the security breach was limited to about 4 hours, but that the threat actors were able to encrypt about 6 months' worth of police data. Files include some local investigative information collected before April 8th, including things like traffic stop and complaints, that were then encrypted by the hackers who were demanding a ransom. While that ransom deadline has come and gone, that city official telling me that the data has not been found during routine searches of the dark web. Demonstrations at Ardmore's Central Park have been happening for 52 consecutive weeks. The Carter County Democratic Party on Saturday marked 1 year of recurring political demonstrations every weekend. While topics of those demonstrations have varied over the past 12 months, touching on topics including healthcare, immigration, and more recently the war in Iran, one organizer told me over the weekend that awareness has been the group's main focus. While a core group of about a dozen mostly older activists have kept the weekly demonstrations happening every Saturday at Central Park, the most recent demonstration drew at least 30 or so, including several teenagers. Music education at Ardmore City Schools received an award from an international trade organization last month. The National Association of Music Merchants last week named Ardmore City Schools one of the 2026 best communities for music education. The district was recognized for student access to music education and was one of only 5 Oklahoma school districts to receive this recognition. Last weekend, Ardmore school orchestras from Jefferson Elementary, Ardmore Middle School, and Ardmore High School traveled to Guthrie for the Heartland Music Festival and brought home 2 trophies and several sectional medals. 5 of Ardmore's splash pads will be reopening today. Ardmore Parks and Recreation back on Tuesday announced that splash pads at Broadlawn, Central, Douglas, Southwest, and Whittington parks would all be turned on beginning on Friday, May 1st. The city's splash pads will be available for free throughout the summer until October 1st. The remains of 6 unclaimed military veterans will be coming to Ardmore next week and interred at the local military cemetery. The Oklahoma Department of Veterans Affairs on Friday announced that a project to identify and inter the unclaimed remains of military service members will lay another group to rest at the Seaman First Class Billy Turner Veterans Cemetery coming up on Thursday, May 7th. Governor Kevin Stitt will be in town for that event, and he will be receiving the flag on behalf of those veterans who will be laid to rest. Oklahomans wanting to sign up or change their Sooner Select healthcare coverage can do so during the open enrollment window that opens today and lasts through June 13th. The Oklahoma Healthcare Authority has put together a guide for Oklahomans that want to sign up for or change their health and dental plans. You can find that guide on our website, ardmoreleader.com. Up on the website this weekend and in our printed newsletter this week is a column from Ardmore Leader co-owner Kim Benedict. Has her thoughts on the rise of AI and things we should consider as we find some of this stuff online. You can read her column along with previous editorials and letters to the editor over on the opinion section of our website, ardmoreleader.com. Ardmore financial advisor Cody Steele will wrap up the news with his Edward Jones Market Snapshot commentary from Thursday to talk about this week's earnings reports from some of the biggest tech companies around. And stick around until the end of the podcast because every episode of This Week in Ardmore wraps up with the schedule. This week, I've got some details about upcoming public meetings, some opportunities for kids with physical or mental limitations to play some adaptive soccer, and some information about a free CPR class coming up later this month. This episode of This Week in Ardmore is also sponsored by Reza, Edge of Illusion. This world-renowned illusionist and magician will be at the Goddard Center coming up on Friday, May 8th to wow locals with his latest show. This breathtaking and inspiring journey into the world of impossibility features some jaw-dropping, cutting-edge, and never-before-seen illusions in a production that is a one-of-a-kind experience for the whole family. With over 1.5 million tickets sold around the globe and more than 150 million viewers on major television networks, Reza has become the single most sought-after and highest-viewed touring illusionist on the planet. So again, thanks to Reza, Edge of Illusion, for sponsoring this week's podcast. That show will be happening at the Goddard Center coming up on Friday, May 8th. Information and tickets can be found on the Reza Live website, rezalive.com. So hey, that's the headlines. Now let's take an in-depth look at some of the big things that happened this week in Ardmore for the week of May 1st, 2026. Ardmore City Schools will begin the lengthy bid process to repair damage at Ardmore High School after efforts to declare an emergency were unsuccessful this week. School officials hoped to bypass bid requirements after geothermal units on campus failed over spring break and caused flood damage from the rooftop units. The Ardmore City Schools Board of Education held a special meeting on Monday afternoon to consider that emergency declaration. School attorney Greg Loeffler spoke to the board about the emergency declaration and how it could be used to pay for repairs without going through the competitive bid process, which is required for large capital expenditures.
The Public Competitive Bidding Act requires an onerous process, and rightly so, to protect taxpayer dollars when projects for construction exceed $100,000, which, as Mr. Davis read off, that's going to be the cost here. But part of the Competitive Bidding Act also allows for public bodies to declare an emergency. And when an emergency is declared, the Public Competitive Bidding Act no longer applies. Because this affects a school, and because getting kids back in the classroom is essential, and getting them back in the classroom before August is essential, an emergency certainly exists here.
With board president Steve Oliver absent from Monday's special meeting, Loeffler said that the 4 members that were in attendance would have to unanimously agree to declare that emergency. Member Jimmy or J.D. John was the lone vote against that emergency declaration. Here is John immediately after Monday's meeting when I asked him to comment on his vote.
No, I can't on policy.
John was later asked which policy prevented him from commenting on his vote, but he declined to further elaborate on the record. While state law does prohibit school board members from discussing certain issues like pending litigation or divulging personal information about students or staff, 3 sources I spoke with on background weren't familiar with any sort of policy preventing a school board member from discussing this specific vote. Board discussion did briefly touch on whether local contractors were being involved in the rebuilding process. Loeffler said that the bid process does allow for some preference to be given to businesses located within the school district. Superintendent Andy Davis told board members that the district submitted 3 estimates to its insurance company after that flooding in March. He said that one $340,000 estimate from the sulfur-based RFD construction was higher by $4,000 than the lowest estimate, but that estimate included timetables that would have seen construction started this month and completed before the beginning of the next school year, coming up in mid-August. No Ardmore-based companies did provide districts with estimates. Loeffler said that the emergency declaration would have given board members the ability to choose the estimate based on factors beyond just costs, but by going through the competitive bid process, board members will now be required to award the bid based primarily on costs. Here is Superintendent Andy Davis.
I'm deeply disappointed in the vote today because this is going to further delay the rebuild of our high school for our students.
Now, Davis estimates up to 2 weeks for a bid package to be put together, followed by 21 days of advertising for bids. Any bids submitted to the district would then have to be opened and awarded at an open school board meeting, which David estimated would be by late June. After Monday's special board meeting, I asked Davis if the timetable or the costs would be more important to the district in this scenario.
Both things are extremely important. The timetable is equally as important because I prefer not to have a construction site at the high school while students are there. We would deal with this first couple of weeks now if we were able to get started, but now it'll be pushing into the first part of next year.
During Monday's special meeting, board members also voted to add Board President Steve Oliver as a signatory to 3 district bank accounts. The rather benign housekeeping vote after board officer realignments during the board's regular April meeting also saw John as the lone no vote. He also raised points of order during Monday's special school board meeting to claim that motions made by fellow board members were incorrect based on guidance he had received from board member training earlier last month. During the meeting, John also made several critical remarks about the district's previous spending and board compliance. An investigation is underway after a portion of Ardmore's digital infrastructure was targeted in a ransomware attack last month. The city's top IT official telling me that a federal investigation was launched within hours of the data breach that did impact some police records. City of Ardmore Information Technology Director Rob Newell telling me on Wednesday that Ardmore was among numerous organizations targeted in this cyber attack back in early April. He estimated that threat actors had very limited access to just a portion of the city's network for about 4 hours, which in that time they were able to encrypt about 6 months worth of police data. Now, while most of the data impacted by the breach is accessible through public records requests, Newell said that some data about juveniles and victims of crimes may also have been included. Here is IT Director Rob Newell on Wednesday.
So if you got pulled over, if you had any sort of record that the Ardmore Police Department had an investigation going on you, or just even a traffic ticket, all of that is that information.
This April 8th cyber attack was limited to only a portion of the city's computer network. Newell said that city digital operations like police, billing, human resources, and others are all segmented for digital security and are not accessible between departments. Equipment and databases that store financial information for city-provided services, for personnel information, or customer billing information was not accessible during this incident.
If you were in finance, you can't get to the police. And if you're in the police, you can't get to finance. If I sit down on my computer and I log in, I can't get to police or finance.
Newell said that the breach started in the early morning hours of April 8th and was contained within about 4 hours. About 6 years of police data was encrypted in this cyber attack, and threat actors demanded a ransom to decrypt that data. Newell said that the ransom information, though, was immediately sent to the Federal Bureau of Investigations and the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Now, organizations are required to notify the public about potential data breaches, and Newell said that this week's announcement was made about 20 days after the breach, so authorities could continue to investigate without tipping off those attackers. And while the cyber attackers demanded a ransom to decrypt this compromised data, Newell said that a deadline to pay has come and gone, and he has not seen any local data released publicly. Newell does have that encrypted data on 3 external hard drives that are completely isolated from the rest of the city's network. He said that white hats, security researchers that work to repair vulnerabilities or to restore compromised data, he said that these white hats will be working to try to decrypt this data.
We never stopped running the city. The city was never stopped. The police department is doing things a little different right now until we get a kind of working, completely functioning system. Because right now the FBI has us locking down the server that it's currently on, so we can't touch it until their case is done. Once their case is done, then they'll say, hey, it's yours, and then we can move on.
Newell said that the city's network is probed for vulnerabilities or targeted for attacks about 10,000 times every day. And that goes beyond just regular bot traffic that scours the internet for search engines or other legitimate reasons. Newell said that this is the second and worst attack that the city has faced in his 19 years on the job.
Before ransomware was even known, that it was even a term that we knew, we had someone get into a computer because someone clicked on an email that they shouldn't have. They got into that computer, and that's as far as they got. And they messed up that computer. That computer didn't have anything on it. We didn't know what happened. There was a ransom note on it. We went, that's stupid. We re-imaged the computer and went on. So that was one. This is our second.
Efforts continue to keep city employees mindful of these phishing attacks where a threat actor will send a deceptive email asking the recipient to click on a link that can then prompt malicious software to install or run on that computer. Employees here in the city of Ardmore tested with fake emails about once per month. Newell told me that when employee testing started, about 42% of those emails he would send to city employees would see recipients clicking on links that could have been malicious. But he said that today, only about 1% of emails sent to test employees' awareness of phishing scams end up getting opened. As for the data compromised during this most recent cyber attack, Newell said that the ransom deadline has come and gone and that none of the suspected data has been found online. Considering the encrypted data took almost an entire day for him to remove to 2 external storage devices, Newell told me that he's unsure of how much data could have actually been copied by the attackers during that roughly 4-hour window. Does your group or organization have a public event coming up? Every episode of This Week in Ardmore wraps up with the schedule to give our listeners an idea of just a few things happening around town. Email your event details to connect@ardmoreleader.com or give me a call at 319-9688 and tell me all about it. Right now, let's catch up with Ardmore financial advisor Cody Steele to hear his Edward Jones Market Snapshot commentary from Thursday afternoon.
This is financial advisor Cody Steele from Edward Jones, bringing you the daily financial market report. U.S. equity markets traded firmly higher on Thursday as investors digested the latest wave of corporate earnings, including results from tech giants Alphabet, Amazon, Meta, and Microsoft. Results were generally positive, with all 4 companies reporting better than expected sales. However, shares of Meta and Microsoft declined 8.7% and 3.9% respectively, as investors likely weighed whether higher capital expenditure guidance will ultimately translate to stronger profits, in our view. The S&P 500 gained 1% on the day and finished April up 10.4%, its strongest monthly gain since November of 2020. It was also a busy day on the economic calendar, with real GDP growing at a 2% annualized rate in the first quarter. Headline personal consumption expenditure, PCE inflation, rising 3.5% year over year in March, and core PCE increasing 3.2%. Additionally, initial jobless claims declined to 189,000 last week, the lowest reading since 1969. Overseas, Asian markets were mostly lower overnight, while European markets traded higher after the Bank of England and European Central Bank left their policy rates unchanged. Bond yields declined, with the 10-year Treasury finishing at 4.38% and the 2-year yield at 3.88%. In commodity markets, oil prices also moved lower, with the West Texas Intermediate crude oil settling around $105 a barrel. In addition to a busy day in corporate earnings, Thursday also brought a slew of key economic data. First quarter real GDP rose at 2% annualized pace, below expectations for a 2.3% gain, but an improvement from the 0.5% reading in the government shutdown impacted fourth quarter. Looking under the hood, a 4.4% rebound in government spending and a 10.4% gain in non-residential investment were bright spots for the quarter. On the investment side, a 43.4% annualized jump in information processing equipment played a large role in non-residential investment, likely underscoring continued momentum in AI-related investment trends. Personal consumption, which makes up the lion's share of GDP, grew at a 1.6% annualized rate, below the average quarterly gain of roughly 2.75% over the past 3 years. Thursday's data also included the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, the Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index for March. Headline prices rose 0.7% for the month, while core PCE, which excludes food and energy, increased 0.3%, in line with expectations. The March gain brought the annual change in core PCE to 3.2%, the highest since January 2024. Meanwhile, initial jobless claims declined to 189,000 last week, the lowest weekly reading since 1969. On balance, we would characterize Thursday's data as evidence that economic activity remains steady, supported by strong corporate investment trends and a stable labor market, despite the recent move higher in inflation. While the war in Iran poses downside risks to economic activity, if it escalates further or extends well into the second half of the year, our base case calls for steady growth throughout 2026, with real GDP likely to expand by around 2% this year. Corporate earnings remain front and center, with 4 members of the Magnificent Seven, Alphabet, Amazon, Meta, and Microsoft, reported results after the market closed on Wednesday, and Apple reported after the bell on Thursday. Results were broadly positive for the quarter, with all 4 companies topping expectations on both top and the bottom lines. However, the market reaction was mixed, with Meta and Microsoft closing sharply lower. In our view, this highlights the elevated bar for expectations and investor concerns around higher capital expenditure guidance for the year and whether that spending will translate into stronger profits over time. With nearly 60% of the S&P 500 companies having reported first quarter results, earnings for the index are now expected to grow at 14.5% in the first quarter, up from expectations of roughly 12% at the end of March. We believe healthy profit growth, supported by resilient economic activity and strong AI investment trends, should provide a favorable backdrop for equity markets over the balance of the year. On Thursday, U.S. equities closed higher. The Dow closed up 790 points, or 1.62%, at 49,652. The NASDAQ closed up 219 points, or 0.89%, at 24,892. The S&P 500 closed up 73 points, or 1.02%, at 7,209. And in the bond market, 10-year Treasury yields were trading at 4.38%, lower by 0.03 percentage points. In stocks of local interest on Thursday, Walmart was up $3.92 to $131.93 a share. Dollar General was up $1.81 to $115.94 a share. Dollar Tree was up $1.41 to $97.11 a share. Best Buy was up $1.76 to $60.49 a share. OG&E was up $1.46 to $48.80 a share. O'Reilly Automotive was up $7.71 to $99.40 a share. ExxonMobil was down 34 cents to $154.33 a share. And lastly, Devon was up 29 cents to $51.37 a share. In commodity markets on Thursday, the price of crude oil was down $1.79 or 1.67% at $105.10 a barrel. And the spot price of gold was up $67.20 or 1.47% to $4,628.70 an ounce. This has been Thursday's Financial Market Report, brought to you by Edward Jones and financial advisor Cody Steele, member SIPC, serving individual investors with personalized attention and financial advice at 333 West Main Street, Suite 275 in Ardmore, Oklahoma. If you would like additional information, please contact me at 580-223-3870. Daily commentary is also located on our website at edwardjones.com.
All right, here's the rundown of how you can find Ardmore Leader between these podcasts. We distribute newsletters across town. You can also get a digital copy of that newsletter emailed to you every week. Check out our website, ardmoreleader.com, and then scroll to the bottom of the homepage to get signed up for free. You can also find us on social media. Just search for Ardmore Leader wherever, on whichever platform you use, and see if we're there. You can also do the same thing and search Ardmore Leader wherever you listen to music or stream podcasts, and get subscribed to this podcast so you can get notified of new episodes each week. And hey, do you want to post any of your thoughts, your ideas, or maybe even some of your artwork for Ardmore to see? Visit our website, ardmoreleader.com. Head over to the opinion section and then submit a letter to the editor. You can also email me stuff, letters, poems, cartoons, pieces of art. You can even record your own voice note and email that to soundoff@ardmoreleader.com. I do ask, though, if you do a voice recording, just keep it under 60 seconds. And make sure you include your full name in the email, no matter what you're sending, so you can stand behind your submission. And again, thanks to the Res Alive Edge of Illusion show happening at the Goddard Center next week for sponsoring this week's podcast. Find information about that Friday, May 8th show online, resalive.com. You can also visit the Ardmore Leader Facebook page for a link to purchase your tickets. Now, if your group or organization has a public event coming up, let me know about it, and I'll see about getting it on the schedule. In public meetings next week, the Carter County Commission will hold their regular meeting on Monday morning, May 4th at 9 a.m. at the County Administration Building on the corner of A Street and Broadway here in downtown Ardmore. The agenda for that meeting can be found on the county's website, cartercountyok.us. The Ardmore City Commission will meet for their first meeting of the month coming up on Monday, May 4th at 6 p.m. on the third floor of City Hall. The agenda for that meeting can be found on the city's website, ardmorecity.org. Included on next week's agenda will be the swearing in of Commissioner-elect Buddy Simon, along with the reorganization of the board, where commissioners will elect a mayor and a vice mayor. The Ardmore Beautification Council's Earth First Expo is back for another year. They'll have a spring plant swap, environmental education, and some kids' crafts. The Ardmore Earth First Expo happening at the Thompson Square on West Broadway. That's coming up tomorrow, Saturday, May 2nd, from 9 a.m. until 1 p.m. Young anglers are invited to take part in the Ardmore Parks and Recreation Department's Fishing Derby. Coming up on Saturday, May 2nd, kids between 4 and 15 years old can head to the Kids Fishing Pond at Regional Park and try to hook the biggest fish, try to hook the smallest fish, or just try to hook the most fish. Prizes will be awarded. This is happening at the Regional Park Kids Fishing Pond on Saturday, May 2nd, beginning at 9 a.m. Entry cost is $5. Registration for this fishing derby can be found on the Park and Recreation Department's Facebook page. Kids that don't normally get to participate in sporting activities are going to have a very unique opportunity this month to take to the pitch. Ardmore Parks and Recreation Department is hosting an adaptive play soccer season for kids with special needs. Beginning on Thursday, May 7th, and happening every Thursday in the month of May, is an adapted soccer program that's designed for individuals with autism, special health care needs, physical, cognitive, or emotional challenges. This program is going to be emphasizing skill development, coordination, and social interaction through some small-sided play, flexible rules, and a very supportive coaching staff in a structured setting. Registration for this is going to be $40. Games will be played at the Regional Park North Softball Complex on Thursdays in May, and registration can be found on the Parks and Recreation Facebook page. And a free public CPR class will be returning to the Ardmore Public Library later this month. The Southern Oklahoma Ambulance Service will hold this free class coming up on Wednesday, May 13th, beginning at 10 a.m. at the Ardmore Public Library. I'm Ardmore Leader News Director Michael Dean Smith. Thank you for listening to episode 62 of This Week in Ardmore. Follow us online, ardmoreleader.com, or on social media. And until next Friday, I hope you have a positive week ahead.